Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 65th ever Highlight Haven interview. My name is Matthew Heiserman, and today we are joined by rapper NAHreally. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Matthew. Really appreciate it. Congrats on 65. It's a big number.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and can't thank you enough for coming on. Right off the bat, I just want to start by asking when you first knew that you wanted to enter the field of rapping.
Oh man, the first time I really started recording music was when I was a sophomore or early junior in high school.
Mhm.
I was just had become a hip hop fan and I had been in bands and eventually, made my way to being like the front man and sort of rapping a little bit. And so I started recording, but I didn't totally lean into it. From then on, high school into college, I was doing it off and on, working on stuff every now and then. But then when I turned about 24, I thought to myself, this keeps coming up. It's clearly something that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
So I want to give it a go for real. And so what I did was I decided I was going to go to the open mic at NAHreally Poets Cafe in East Village in New York City every Monday, and just to see if I could, compete. New Eurekan's a pretty legendary spot.
Yeah.
And so I thought to myself, okay, if I can do it there, get a little bit of respect, then I can really, try my hand at it. So I did it. I went once and then I waited a year to go back. I was so stressed out. It went well, but it was a lot. And then a year after that, I started going every single week. And that's when I started really committing to recording and releasing music and performing and being part of the community.
Yeah, I love to hear that. And you mentioned how you were always a big music fan. When you were first getting into hip hop, do you remember if there was a specific album or artist that really made you fall in love with the genre to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, Wu-Tang Clan for me, when I
Yeah.
was in high school, I got, turned on to kind of golden era hip hop.
Mhm.
And so I went deep there. I went deep on Wu-Tang. I became a big fan of Big L, Das Effects. And then, it's interesting what kind of brought me into the present was Currency. I became a pretty big fan of Currency during that blog era. And that eventually led me to, through a circuitous route, get a little more tapped in with indie hip hop today. But for me, right, it goes back to Wu-Tang Clan, and immediately preceding that was definitely Rage Against the Machine. So, they get categorized into rock, but Zach De La Rocha to me is one of the best MCs of the last 50 years. He's super talented. So, yeah, it's kind of my pipeline to where I'm at now.
Now, when you first started rapping, were there any other names you had prior to Nah Really, and how did that name come to be?
Yeah, Daktronics, like the scoreboards.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know what it was. That was my rap name in high school. I must have been doing warm ups in basketball or something and looked up and said Daktronics sounds like a great rap name.
Mhm.
Other than that, I think I was in a band called Duke Rogers for a brief period. I don't totally know how that originated. And then Not Really came to be a little bit before I started hitting those open mics. I wish I could tell you a great story about it, but there just isn't one. I think I just picked it. And actually, one of the hosts at that open mic at New Eureka, his name's Soul, he always kind of made a bit of a joke about, oh, you're a rapper. Oh, this guy's a rapper. Oh, not really. He really is. So, it worked out that way, but there's
Mhm.
truly no background story. And if there is one, I forgot it.
Now, when you started rapping and throughout your career, has there been any other rappers that you've taken inspiration from, kind of picked up their music and added it to yours?
I think I say, I really do think Big L is a big inspiration for me, mainly because he is rapid fire with the flow, but ultra clear, right? I
Yeah.
appreciate that he's including a lot of syllables, but never sacrificing clarity. Um, Beyond that, it's really just an amalgamation of the things that I've listened to over the years. Um, it's great to get inspired, but I try not to think about it too much so as not to psych myself out. One time I was on a different podcast. They said, "Is there an artist?" Or I was responding to a written prompt, and they said, "Is there an artist that you have to check yourself to make sure that you're not stealing their style. And I always think that with Homeboy Sam, man, he has the most infectious style of rapping. And
Mhm.
so I need to be conscious not to be falling into that mode because, he's definitely one of my contemporary favorites.
Now, before we get into some of your work that you've been releasing recently, if there was any rapper in the world that you would want to collaborate with the most, it could be as realistic or unrealistic as you want, who would it be?
Man, well, you know what? At one point, it was Open Mike Eagle, and I was lucky enough to
Mhm.
get in touch with him to get a feature from him. When the expert and I worked on that album, we said to ourselves, "Who are our two ideal features?" I said Open Mike Eagle. He said Hemlock Ernst, and we ended up getting both of them, which was wild. If I could get anybody, man, that's a tough question. I think Edon. I think he might be
Mhm.
up there. That'd be a really cool feature to get because I know he doesn't do many of them.
Mhm.
But it would really have to be the right song. I'm not I'm not I haven't done I haven't had a ton of features on my records, but I like to think that I let the instrumental dictate who we end up picking and who ends up coming on. And so, yeah, if I had the right beat, that would kind of be a dream feature for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when it comes to the writing process, what does that look like for you? For instance, is there a specific time of day you like to write? How long could it take to write something? Do you use pen and paper, a computer, just stuff like that?
My ideal time to write is on a Saturday or Sunday morning with
Mhm.
nothing to do. How often that happens? Very rarely, though. Uh, I don't have a set time. I don't have a particular schedule. That's actually something I've been wanting to work on is getting a little bit more disciplined about the writing process and showing up once a day, every other day, things like that. But it looks different and it evolves a lot. There have been
Mhm.
times I've written in the phone notes app. There's been times I've been a pen and paper type of guy. There's other times, in Logic Pro, there's a notes section where I'm recording and I'll sometimes write the lyrics in there. So it's a mixed bag. For example, this past weekend, I was driving up to Maine and it was a 6 hour drive and I wrote the rhymes in my head. And then, when I got a chance and I wasn't in a dangerous driving situation, I
Mhm.
recorded a voice memo, right? And so it comes in many different ways, and there's many different means of doing it. So, I wish that I could have that regular practice, but by nature of having a day job, being busy, I kind of just got to get it in when I can get it in. I think though my ideal really would be a Saturday morning, pencil and paper, right? Nothing on the schedule and just get it in that way. Then when it comes to writing, sort of depends too. I use a bunch of different approaches, whether that means writing conceptually, whether that means writing in a more stream of consciousness mode.
Mhm.
Yeah, just, I'm bouncing around and it's all over the place. My biggest challenge is to make sure that I'm not only writing when inspiration strikes, but being able to do it and, make it a practice, the noun practice, something that I do regularly.
Now, you mentioned the expert earlier, and on April 16th, it was announced that you and the expert will have a show in Amsterdam on May 9th. Can you just break down what the preparation has looked like for this show now that it's under 2 weeks away?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really excited for it. My wife and I were already going to Amsterdam, and Rucksack
Mhm.
Records is based in Amsterdam. And I hit up Danny. Shout out to Danny, the label head of
Mhm.
Rucksack Records. And I said, "Oh, let's get dinner. Maybe we can meet up." And he said, "Well, why don't we just organize a show?" I was like, I was going to bring that up myself too. And so, long story short, we asked the expert if he might be interested in coming out. And Dublin, Ireland, where he lives, is only an hour and 40 flight to Amsterdam. So he got tickets, we pulled it together. And basically what the preparation has been looking like for that set, because normally actually it's right here. Normally I'll play my instrumentals off of a SP404 sampler myself,
Mhm.
right? So I don't work with a DJ and I'll just, trigger the instrumentals that I have there.
Mhm.
With the expert, he's going to be my DJ. So
Yeah.
he and I met. We talked about the set list. We put it out on a Google Doc. I actually you're hearing this now. I have a slight change to the set list I got to hit him up about this week.
Mhm.
So we put the order in. We kind of, got where we agreed, added some newer stuff that we're working on, maybe as a little teaser. And then ultimately, what it comes down to, it's up to him to figure out the way he's going to do it behind me. And then for me, I just need to practice and make sure that my breath is up. Um, a lot of times when I have a show coming up, I try and do this set pretty much every night for, at least 5 or 6 days in advance.
Mhm.
In this instance, I'm trying to do it a little bit more just because,
Yeah.
it's going to be a longer set. I want to,
Mhm.
make a good impression my first time. I've never met the expert in real life, so this will be our first time meeting. It's just been purely on Zoom. And so yeah, that's the biggest thing is planning that set list and then making sure that my breath is up so I can deliver when I'm finally there.
Yeah, well, that's awesome that you're going to get to do this show. And, your album Blip was fully produced by the expert. However, pretty much all of your other work has been self produced, including your most recent album, Secret Pancake. What do you feel like are some of the positives and negatives of producing your own album? And do you think that when you produce your own album, it's sort of allows you to have more creative, artistic creativity or freedom in a sense?
I think the
Mhm,
same thing is a pro and a con, right?
mhm,
Uh, the fact that it's just you can be both a pro and
mhm,
both a con. So, I have total control over what's going on. I
mhm,
don't have to wait for anybody. I can just go where my mind takes me and peel it back. I can just kind of, follow whatever comes to mind. So it's a big pro to be doing it by myself. But for example, I'm working on a self produced album right now, and I'm a little stuck. I'm at a point where I'm not totally sure where to go. I feel like I'm
mhm,
a few songs away, but I don't have what's I don't have ideas for where to
mhm,
go. So being by yourself can be also a little isolating or a little challenging.
mhm,
um I do think also, and again, it's kind of both a pro and a con. It can feel lower stakes when I'm using my own instrumentals, right? If the expert sends me a beautiful instrumental, I'm like, I got to nail this. When it's my own, I can take a slightly more laid back tact and just kind of have fun with it.
mhm.
Uh, I think sometimes it can be the opposite of pushing yourself, which sometimes your comfort zone is a great place to be. In other instances, you want to be outside of your comfort zone working on something that's, a little more grandiose.
Mhm.
So, a lot of the pros are both pros and cons for sure. And sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Does it sort of give you a little more artistic creativity in a way where you're able to do your own thing and not worry about, especially when someone else is on the credits of that song, you're kind of just able to make that song completely yours?
Yeah, I think yeah. I mean, like I said, yeah, I can take it wherever I want. Um, what's also freeing about it too. I find making the instrumentals to be, they take a lot of brain power, but it's a different kind of brain power. And
Mhm,
so I find making beats to be a little bit more relaxing than writing lyrics sometimes. So, it's less stress and I can balance that time.
mhm.
Half of it is making the beats, half of it is writing. Whereas when I'm working with someone else, it's all writing and that's my end of the bargain and I have to hold it up. So there's a little bit of pressure there.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, Secret Pancake was entirely produced by yourself. Can you just break down what the process looks like of creating your own beats?
Absolutely. So I got two ways of making instrumentals. Um, the first is on the computer, which I can't show you because I'm right here. And that's how I made Loose Around the Edges and I made Secret Pancake. So
Mhm,
use Logic Pro, the digital audio workstation, and make the beats in there. I'll start with the drums usually, then manipulate the samples. When you're in the computer, the options are so much greater to mess with the sample, and it's just so much you can do. So the beats usually start with the drums and then go from there. In other instances, I don't know if we can see it here. I got my MPC 1000. So the album I have Hacking Away, and
mhm,
this next self-produced album I have is made on the MPC 1000. And that's, older technology and a slightly different approach. and it makes me be less about manipulating samples and more about finding phrases of music that feel as though they can have drums added to them, right? So it's two different ways of producing. That's how I keep myself interested in the process. Um, but yeah, I mean, it involves a lot of listening, a lot of looking for samples, a lot of finding the perfect drum sound to go with those samples. And I like to keep it simple. I don't like to do too much other than use that sample. So I want something with a nice bass line, something that covers the full spectrum of sound. And yeah, it's just a fun little art project to just find something and then make something new out of it.
Mhm. And for each beat on Secret Pancake, it consists of a sample, which you mentioned, and then a kick, a snare, and a hi-hat. How do you pick out the sample for each song? I know you said what you like to look for in a sample. How do you sort of discover those samples, and how long does it take you to determine whether a sample will or won't fit with a specific song?
I mean, the beat comes first. So the lyrics are what turns it into the song. And I think the process, it's really immediate. Sometimes I'll make the drum pattern and then I'll cycle through like a big batch of samples that I have and pick something that sounds right and feels good. Other times I'll start with the sample. I'm just like, ooh, this section is so perfect. So it's really not one size fits all. And for me in particular, I'm not a painstaking digger of samples. So it's a relatively quick process. When I hear something that catches my ear, I
Mhm.
bookmark it or put it on a playlist or something like that, and then eventually come back to it. What is kind of interesting though is I'll make beats, and I have so many beats that I haven't used or maybe will never use just because it doesn't make me start writing, right?
Mhm.
So in a lot of instances when it becomes a song is more based off the inspiration that comes as a result of the instrumental I've created, as opposed to trying to make a song where when I'm really just sort of making a beat that may later become a song.
Now, if you're just jotting down lyrics, has there ever been a situation where you can't really find a beat that fits with those lyrics and you have to scrap them?
That's a good question. I write to beats mostly.
Mhm.
I really write to beats mostly. I recently wrote something not to a beat. I just have total faith I'll find something that I'll work on. I yeah, I don't think that's happened to me. No, I usually write to the beat, and then also when I'll usually find something.
Yeah, because I was just wondering, you mentioned the drive to Maine and how you were, writing some stuff down there. Did you have a beat in mind when you were doing that?
Oh, I had instrumentals playing
Mhm.
over and
Yeah.
over and over in the
Mhm.
car, and so I'm literally a big part of my writing process is rapping out loud.
Yeah.
I have nothing against punching. I have nothing against being in the studio and not being able to do everything in one take. But for me, I like to be able to finish the verse that I write in one take. So rapping out loud just plays a big role in checking and making sure that what I'm saying is coming across smooth and clear. And my final versions that I record aren't always just a single take, but every take I do, I go through pretty much the whole thing and then pick bits and pieces from it.
Mhm. Now, when you look at an album like Blip, it feels like a slightly more serious or conceptual album. And in my opinion, Secret Pancake feels like a very, warm, inviting, laid back album, especially since it was self produced. You were kind of able to go with your own flow. And, is that the kind of vibe you were trying to go for when you were making Secret Pancake? And what was the recording process like for that album?
Yeah, I think it was in a way. I think it's a bit of the other side of the coin from Blip. I made Blip. It felt like I was really going for it. And so I
Mhm.
thought to myself, all right, let me chill out. Let me just do what comes. Let me write the lyrics that come to me. Let me pick the best of those lyrics and then record it. And the process was just fun and chill, and it was laid back, right? It was a process in home cooking. I'm literally sitting where I work on it and where I record. I got the microphone right behind me. So it was just a slow but sure chipping away at a particular piece that was just kind of a reflection of where I was at that moment. It came out probably in a less chill moment in the world and for myself, but at that time, I'd put out something I was really proud of. I was moving on to the next thing and I wanted to take it back to basics. And yeah, I do all my recording right here. I make all of my beats right here. I'm definitely a big desk guy. The only thing that I'm really kind of mobile with is the writing.
Mhm. And, if you could use only one word to describe the album Secret Pancake, what would it be?
Syrup. Uh, it's yeah, syrup. I think it's kind of got that color to it, right? It's kind of got that stickiness, that smoothness, the way that the samples kind of, warble and warp a little bit. Yeah, I think syrup.
Now, I liked how you had uh, the audio on the first track especially, where it's like the people talking in the background. It almost sounded like an MF Doom intro or something of that sort, where he isn't necessarily always rapping on the first song. Is that something you were kind of playing with when you were just finding a way to start the album?
Yeah, I think, all those clips come from one little film, right? They're all from one thing. And to me, sometimes in these more stream of consciousness albums, I find myself craving a thread that coheres everything and keeps it all together. And so I oftentimes will look for clips to do that. And so, it's a well-worn tradition in a particular strain of hip hop to use clips, sometimes funny, sometimes serious, things like that. And so I felt comfortable doing it because it's not so outside of, the realm of like the hip hop that I listen to and respect and love. But also on the flip side, I really wanted to, make the album make sense. In a lot of ways, if you take my lyrics away from the clips, it doesn't really have much to do with pancakes except that one song. So it kind of just, gave it that thread and gave it that shape and helped pace it.
Now, we've kind of discussed this, but why did you pick Secret Pancake as the name, and how did you kind of make that relate to the purpose you were trying to get with the album?
Yeah, I think I had the song Secret Pancake. So, the hook goes at home eating pancakes, working with
Mhm,
my dog on that secret handshake,
mhm,
something that I said would make a great band name. And, the band name is implied in my own head to be Secret
mhm,
Pancake. I was like, oh, that'll work for an album name. And it just stuck with me and it felt right. Like the feel just felt right. And then when I found those clips, I was like, oh my goodness, lucky me. This is perfect. They're saying the recipe is secret.
yeah,
You know, it's about pancakes literally. So it kind of just all coalesced. It's up for the people who listen to decide what makes it about pancakes or not. And
mhm.
I very much though, the thing that I kind of hang my hat on is I think the music I make, particularly the self-produced stuff, feels very homemade. And I like that. I like that. I like having something that you can sort of understand and see what went into it.
Now, one thing I love about your music is how relatable and genuine it comes off. I think an example of that is "Smarter Than I Am" off Blip, where you were talking about watching NBA League Pass. I thought that line was really funny. Is that something that sort of comes naturally to you when you're writing?
It's a good question. And thank you very much. I like to spot check myself while I'm writing. I don't want to come across preachy. I don't want to lie. I don't want to be something I'm not.
Yeah.
And I think I don't think "Nah really" is exactly who I am in my everyday life, but it's pretty close, or maybe it's an idealized version of it. And so, I don't overthink it. I don't think about it too much. But at the end of the day, I'm the one who makes the final call on what
Mhm,
makes it into a song. And I want it to be maybe not relatable, but I just want it to be something I stand by.
mhm.
Right. And that's sort of how I try to carry myself. So what I'm trying to do is just match how I want to be perceived. I think in some ways it does come naturally, but at the same time, you got to always keep yourself honest and
Mhm,
make sure that what you're doing is staying true to what you hope that you're doing.
mhm. Now, I know you're a big Patriots fan and a big sports fan in general. So I guess for my sports audience that is watching this, uh, I have to ask you, what's your thoughts on the Patriots draft and what's your expectations for them this upcoming season?
I bought into the short arms hype for a minute on Will Campbell. Um, I saw one interview with him and I got over it immediately.
Uh,
I am totally all in. I love the dude's personality.
mhm,
There was a clip of him at the Patriots facility talking about how there was a Bass Pro Shops out in the distance, and he said, "I'm going to be like Matt Light hunting behind the stadium." And I don't know who told him to reference Matt Light. Maybe it was him himself, but I'm all in. I just think the dude has a great personality, attitude. I feel like Mike Vrabel is making a team. You can tell what kind of team he's trying to make by that pick. Now, I'm not as good with names down the line, but that running back from Ohio State, I'm pumped about.
mhm, yep.
What's his name? Do you know it off the top of your head?
Is it Travion Henderson? Was that the
Yes.
one? Mhm, yep.
I'm so excited. I haven't done my homework just yet, but
Mhm,
it seems like he went later than expected. And then same with that edge rusher too, went later than expected. Look, my entire life almost, or my entire sports fan
mhm,
life was Bill Belichick trading picks and leaving us just sort of wondering what was going on. And so just to see a draft like this, and I know it's just a draft, and I know some of these players
mhm,
might flame out in a season and a half, but to just have something to be excited about after the season the Patriots had last year, I'm happy. Oh, and
mhm,
the kicker too. They got, I think, one of the best kickers in the
mhm,
draft, who apparently idolizes Adam Vinatieri. Look, I
mhm,
can't complain. I
mhm.
can't complain.
Now also, obviously, the Celtics are up 3-1 against the Magic in the playoffs, with a chance to win the series tonight. I'm sure you're gonna be tuning into that game. Are you expecting the Celtics to go all the way for a second straight year, and are there any teams that you're worried about during this run?
Look, I think they can. I think the Celtics can make a run. I'm
Mhm,
confident. There are a few nagging injuries that are going on right
mhm,
now, and man, knock on wood, the Magic are great at creating situations that might
mhm,
injure players on the other team. I'll just leave it at that. Um, I'm confident,
mhm,
but the Cavs look really good, especially
mhm.
after last night. Beat the Heat by nearly 60.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm,
but man, I am really, really scared of OKC.
mhm,
They make even the most basic pass around the perimeter like a potential turnover. I'm just like they're just so young and hungry and long, but I'm confident about the Celtics because at the
mhm,
end of the day, Tatum, if he's locked in, and then it's kind of just math ball, right? They're gonna shoot the
mhm,
threes. They're gonna hopefully make the correct percentage of the threes and then should win as a result. It's kind of difficult for me sometimes as a fan to root for percentages every game, game in and game out.
mhm,
But
yeah,
it's I believe it. I believe in what they're
mhm,
doing, and so I feel confident. But yeah, I mean, in the East, I'm a little afraid of the
mhm.
Cavs just because Donovan Mitchell is scary, and then in the West, definitely OKC too.
I mean, I'm a Wizards fan, so NBA kinda picks back up during the lottery,
Yeah.
but I'm hoping for the Celtics Thunder finals. That would be an incredible matchup. But with that being said, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I really do appreciate it. Is there anything else you wanna say to the people watching before we wrap things up? Where can they find some of your work if you wanna plug anything that you have coming up or anything that you've released recently?
Yeah, and I have to say quickly, and I don't know what the odds are right now, but I hope that you guys get Cooper Flag. I hope the Wizards get
Yeah.
Cooper Flag. That'd be great. He's from Maine, so I gotta love him.
I
He's
think I think it's 14% for the worst 3 teams, and I know we're one of them, so
okay.
I think it's 14% for us.
We'll see. We'll
Mhm.
see. Man, what do I have going on? You can find me online, underscore NAHreally underscore. I got, a newsletter you can sign up for at NAHreally.substack.com. I run a show in the New York City area called Another Rap Show with another MC and producer named Dunce Cap. So check that out. We post about it all the time. And I'm on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, everything. And Matthew, I appreciate you having me on. This was really cool, and I love to see you out here doing your thing. It's really exciting.
I appreciate that. And, if you're watching this, stay tuned for the album that you kind of teased a little bit during this interview that you're working on. But again, big thanks to Not Really for being the 65th ever Highlight Haven interview guest. And as always, we will see you next time.